The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
McCarthy's saying he's not going to change the plan. He changed it overnight. The Senate has said this is dead on arrival, but it's still important because House Republicans will still have to vote on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, you couldn't get those Midwestern Republicans without allowing the biofuel tax breaks to stay. And there were conservative members of the caucus who really wanted to make sure you could speed up some of these timelines to tie work requirements with Medicaid and some other social programs. So these were things that really he had to do to get all the numbers on board. But that's the political football that the debt ceiling has become here. I mean, the loser in the football game is the American people and American living standards, right? I mean, this is what we know we're facing. And we're facing this a lot sooner than we thought. I mean, tax receipts are down something like 35% from the same time last year. That means less money is coming in the tax season. And that money is being used to pay the bills because after January 19th, we couldn't borrow any more money. So this is really incredibly important.
That's fascinating.
And it's coming much sooner than we thought. So early June is this so-called X date. And they're running out of time for a compromise here.
I mean, it is just unbelievable. You put anything in Republican hands and they just mess it up. They screw it up real bad. It's not that they have no ideas. It's that all their ideas are bad. They're bad ideas. I mean, who thought banning books was a good idea other than, a bunch of Republican governors? Really, who thought that, arguing over bathrooms for children was going to solve any American's problem if you had a problem on wages or crime or inflation? Who really thought that debate was going to solve the problem of, paying too much at the gas pump or $9 for a carton of eggs? Really, who thought that? Who thought that, telling parents or that their teachers aren't allowed to say the word gay was going to solve any of the mass shootings that we see in the United States, right? Or banning abortion was going to save women's lives. Literally pulling back on health care for women was literally going to, put a nickel in your pocket. It was going to make you freer. It was going to make you happier. It was going to make you more secure in your situation in the United States, really. And this whole argument about the Food and Drug Administration and mifepristone, a 23-year-old drug, who thinks that's going to solve any of the to-do list problems that you may have voted on in the midterms or in 2020? Who thinks that saves democracy? Who thinks that, having no ethics at the Supreme Court is a really good, ignorable problem? You see what I mean? They don't have, good ideas. They have ideas, but they're all bad ones. This is the problem. And so today, they're sitting there playing chicken with the full faith and credit of the United States of America, honestly. Last night at about 9:30, idiot boy Matt Getz, okay? Can I see your Venmo, please? Idiot boy Matt Getz was on the TV talking, now we have revolving hosts. You understand? Everybody, Tucker's out. Let's just move all the, placemats. Let's just change the seats at the table. Let's just, So now, I mean, at 8 o'clock, I got Michael Smerconish on CNN. Really? This is what I have here? Or was that Don Lemon's seat? That I can't keep track. Everybody's very busy saying, that's the problem. Let's get rid of that. Okay. And so, you had Tucker Lee. Tucker, I think, is in Florida, driving around in a golf cart, having lunch with his wife, celebrating his newfound freedom, and collaborating, on the sly, on the side, with his executive producer to figure out what their next move will be. Must be nice. I swear to God, that's what he's doing. That's all he's doing. And hiring, like one of the most, awesome lawyers to argue that he shouldn't have to do a non-compete, I'm guessing, and that he wants a severance package, not commensurate with him staying off the air. See, in my day, like non-competes, I'm telling you, they are the most bizarre, horrible, horrific anti-labor things you could ever agree to. But in my day, they were there, and either you signed the contract with that in there or you didn't. And they were enforced like they were ironclad. Today, the Supreme Court's actually sitting around saying, we don't think that that's very constitutional. I never thought it was. But here, you know, that what they do is they hand you your severance check and they make you sign a waiver saying you will never sue them. And also that your non-compete now kicks in and you can't work for X amount of months or a year or whatever it is. But, you know, we'll pay you. So now I'm sure Tucker, who is rich, like really stinking rich, like an heir to the Swanson fortune, and his dad was a journalist, or I think his dad was a newscaster. So anyway, he comes from a family that he himself describes as just, you know, so wealthy that he doesn't have to work. He doesn't need to work. And so he's taking his time to sue them, so he can get a, you know, like a Megyn Kelly settlement. You know, what, like $90 million or some crazy amount of money. Anyway, so now there's like revolving chairs. So I'm watching 9 o'clock, it was, on CNN, and I guess it's Michael Smerconish in their lame attempt to just play it down the middle, like Poppy Harlow is ultra political. Or somehow Don Lemon saying the obvious truth that the NRA was not supportive of black people owning guns. And we know that because the only time, the one singular time the NRA was against people and was for gun legislation, was for limiting who can own a gun, was after Bobby Seale and the Black Panthers went to the Capitol in California at Sacramento with a... I don't know, some sort of a menacing-looking weapon strapped around his neck, and the NRA actually said to, Ronald Reagan, who was governor at the time, no, we'll support you in gun regulations. We can't have this. We just can't have this. But so Don Lemon points that out to somebody, and he's fired? Really? And he points out that Nikki Haley is 51 years old in a ham-fisted way, in a ham-handed way. And that's why he's fired? Really? This is what I'm supposed to believe? So everybody's playing musical chairs. But last night at 9 o'clock, Smerconish is interviewing Matt Gaetz in this lame effort to appeal to Republicans who might watch CNN. Did you forget the CNN sucks era? Did you forget that the media was the enemy of the people and this is the Republican position on your network, Mr. Licht? Yes, we know when we're licked all over. And we aren't. But anyway, Gaetz was saying, we're not going to vote on this freaking debt ceiling. We're not going to raise the debt ceiling. We want work requirements for 65-year-olds on Medicaid and or food stamps. Now, I could play you that long video that the Washington Post actually recorded of, I'll say, not in their prime senior men sitting on food lines with their little chihuahua. Remember that guy? And during the COVID pandemic, he was able to get like $230 in SNAP benefits. And now that the COVID is not a pandemic, it's just endemic and somewhat treatable and under control in a certain weird way. There's no more emergency. And so they cut the benefits back down to like $22 a month. And the guy was in line for hours in rural Kentucky waiting for a bag of potatoes. Because he couldn't afford his food? This is who they're going after. This is who Matt Gaetz wants to penalize.
You know the math. He can lose, Speaker McCarthy, can lose 4. Right now, how many holdouts are there, yourself included?
Twice that. So I do not expect that there will be a vote as planned tomorrow on the McCarthy debt limit increase. I think there are still a few details we have to work out on work requirements, on some of the Green New Deal tax credits that we would like to see repealed, and there's some disagreement in our conference about that. And if we're able to get that done, I don't think it'll be tomorrow. I think that there's still some time for the cement to dry. So but it may very well be that what we send out of the House with 218 votes is the only thing we can get 218 votes for. Mr. Schumer and President Biden should take note of that.
Take note of what? Honestly, so he is very busy saying that he's a no on raising the debt ceiling unless the Inflation Reduction Act is gutted and there's work requirements placed on SNAP benefits for people 59 to 65. Now, where in rural Kentucky is a 65-year-old man supposed to find a job in order to get SNAP?
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Let me begin by saying I can't imagine anyone ever thinking of using the debt ceiling as a negotiation wedge. It's a very, very sacred thing in our country, the debt ceiling. We can never play with it. Mr. Chairman, that may sound familiar because it's the words of former President Donald Trump in 2019, who acknowledged that then Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer agreed not to use the debt limit as a weapon. In case anyone forgot, Democrats behaved responsibly and kept our word. Now, 4 years later, House Republicans have not hesitated to use the debt ceiling as a political cudgel. This is extortion. If Democrats don't give Speaker McCarthy everything he wants, Republicans want to literally push the entire economy off a cliff, causing catastrophic, lasting, irreparable damage to America, even though the GOP voted 3 times to prevent default when Trump was president, even though 97% of the debt was accumulated before President Biden took office, and over 25%, and let me repeat that, over 25% of the debt was accumulated under Donald Trump. Even though Republicans had no problem adding trillions to the debt with their giveaways to big oil and Wall Street CEOs, even though their first bill this Congress added $114 billion to the deficit, now they want to play Russian roulette with our economy and refuse to pay our bills unless we make devastating cuts that would hurt everyday people. This is an all-time high in recklessness and stupidity.
Yes, that's what it is, recklessness and stupidity. So don't say they don't have ideas. They have ideas, but they're reckless and stupid and bad is what they are. And so here they are. You're screaming like they're going to be able to, I don't know, pay down the 25% of the debt that Donald Trump added, that 79, 80% of the debt was incurred prior to the Biden presidency, and that all that Joe Biden is looking to do in his budget, all that he's looking to do in his budget is get more tax enforcement on the upper income getters in this country, people whose money makes them money, the capital gains people who are CEOs and make millions of dollars a year while they're gouging you. Okay, this is what the Biden budget is. Now, you know, the president doesn't have any real say in what the budget is because Congress appropriates all the money. And by the way, the proper time to discuss the budget is during budget negotiations. It certainly is not during raising the debt ceiling, which is where we are today. All that needs to happen is the debt ceiling needs to be rubber stamped. It's okay. We will pay the debt that we incurred as a nation under all these presidents from Washington till today. And then we'll have a budget negotiation, and you can argue that you want a 64-year-old man in rural Kentucky to get a stinking job before you give him, $22 in food stamps, and somehow that's going to solve our deficit. That's going to solve the problem that America has. I mean, it's ridiculous because they will never raise a tax on a corporate titan. Their donors won't permit it. Okay, and raising revenue is obviously the answer to the dilemma, right? You could talk about spending, but look where they're talking about cutting in a debt ceiling scenario. It's inappropriate to talk about it at this time. You know how, like after a shooting, we always want to talk about, gun regulation. We always want to talk about banning assault weapons, and they always say, it's too soon. It's just too soon. You have to let 5, 6, 7, 10 more mass murders occur. You have to let 10 more mass shootings happen. And then maybe next year at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll give you 10 minutes to talk about gun safety regulations. But not today. It's too soon. Well, this is not the appropriate moment to talk about the budget. The budget negotiation that Congress will put together is the appropriate moment to talk about cutting VA benefits, which is what they want. $30 billion out of VA benefits. $30 billion. It was in the Military Times today. That's how I saw it. That's where I read it. In the Military freaking Times. They're like, their hair's on fire. They're like, oh my God, $30 billion. Do you understand how many fewer appointments are going to be made and accepted? Do you understand what you're doing over here? I mean, it is unbelievable. But, you know, they want to go after the people that they claim they're for the most, right? The, you know, downtrodden middle class that hasn't gotten a break in 40 years. Meanwhile, Biden is actually putting battery factories in those locales. He's actually building microchip plants in those locales. He specifically went to find the Rust Belt cities that are suffering the worst, that didn't vote for him, by the way. Didn't. Don't like him, don't believe in him, think he's old, think he's doddering, even though their pick is 3 years younger. Ooh. Sorry, everybody. I got corrected by my audience. Thank you very much if you wrote me yesterday. I was saying that Trump is 74. Oh, no. Oh, hell no. Trump is 77. A scant 3-year age difference between the two, but somehow Biden is too old. I honestly, they don't even realize how ridiculously dumb they sound when they say this crap. But set that aside for a brief moment. They think that Donald Trump is breaking the system so that they can benefit. No, Donald Trump is breaking the system so you can become a slave. That's what these work requirements are about. You're talking about disabled people. You're talking about people on who get SNAP benefits that are, you know, over 60 years old and live in these, places that have been decimated by the offshoring of jobs, by the closing of paper mills, by the closing of steel plants, by the closing of auto manufacturing. And Biden is investing in bringing everything back to you because he knows how hard it's been, because he understands America and he understands what it looks like because he's freaking been there. And not to exploit you, but to check and see what he could do to solve some of the problems. And all these deaths of despair in the United States, they are a direct result of corporate policies that said, hey, let's go on a wild goose chase around the globe to find the cheapest labor. And this is also why the Republicans are so into bringing back child labor. Like I said, they have ideas. They're just bad ones. Child labor. I swear to God, and it's not just Arkansas and Iowa anymore. No, it's not. There's an article today by Molly Jong-Fast that I included from the Vanity Fair, but it goes, Vanity Fair? Yeah, but people that know Vanity Fair know that they produce some of the greatest journalism in the history of journalism, along with really, good picks and fashion. I mean, why can't I have my cake and eat it too? Why can't I? So that is my favorite magazine, right? But I mean, the fights they're fighting are for child labor, and not just in Arkansas and not just in Iowa, where they want to eliminate work permits for everybody under the age of 16 and 14-year-olds to work night shifts. It's Ohio, it's Missouri, it's Georgia, it's Iowa, it's Arkansas. It's these backwoods places where meatpacking plants go, and they need to be cleaned, and hotels and motels need to be cleaned, and they should be cleaned by the cheapest labor, and that would be children. I mean, it sounds wildly unpopular when you talk about child labor, but they're going to couch it in, well, they get to play sports. Why shouldn't they be working? And also parental rights. And who can argue with parental rights, right? I can. It's clearly corporate interests that are at the table and your children are on the menu.
Connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Talk to me about why it's so important. What the president has said is, I'm not negotiating with McCarthy on a debt limit increase that has conditions attached to it. Tell me why that's important to the president.
You know, absolutely, Ali. I mean, first of all, as I think you just heard, this is an extreme budget. This is very extreme. You know, this would cut things like cancer research by half over its life, over 10 years. By half, it would cut preschool. By half, it would cut border security, air safety, travel safety. But, you know, if somebody wants to put that forward and have that debate with the American public in a budget context, you know, go ahead. Let's have that debate. But what no one should do, and I mean Democrat or Republican, conservative or liberal, what no one should ever do is say my way, in this case, a pretty extreme MAGA way, or I'm going to default the United States government, for the first time, betray the legacy of our founders and Alexander Hamilton of having an immaculate full faith and credit, and drive us into a deep recession. And believe me, when someone says negotiate on the debt limit, Ali, that is a very sanitized way of saying my way or I'm going to default the economy.
I mean, defaulting the United States of America is such a burn it down to the ground theory of governing that you have to wonder if they're willing to do it, because they love to destroy everything that is decent about this country. The fact that we pay our bills, the fact that we had some sort of trust in the Supreme Court, in our institutions, right? That we were working, to move history, bend the arc of history toward more justice, not less. And they are so antithetical to any of that progress. I mean, they have sold a bill of fear and resentment to their base, to their primary voters. And wouldn't it be just their style to say to their primary voters, Biden did this, when they are doing it because they know that they have low information voters? And so if we defaulted, just so you know, we wouldn't have an FAA. We wouldn't have, air traffic control. So the whole entire travel business, the whole entire, commerce of flying to go to meetings or flying to see if the whole deal is off, right? Because you wouldn't be able to do that. The idea that we would have no border security sort of appeals to their racism and hatred of immigrants, and they could point to the border being insecure and blame Biden for it, even though they're the ones that are defunding border security. The idea that women wouldn't be able to go to work, a la the Taliban, right? Women wouldn't be able to go to work because they're going to cut preschool benefits that some people are able to take advantage of in this country, so that you could have two working parents or a working mother and not have to, fork over, 75% of her paycheck to child care, right? And they want to get rid of, things like cancer investment, to cure cancer. They're talking about speeding up safety net cuts for Medicaid recipients, meaning you have to work if you want Medicaid. You can't work and get Medicaid. You can't, right? Because what's the cutoff for Medicaid eligibility? I think it's $26,000 a year. So you can't work and still be eligible for Medicaid, but that's their little game. And then the same thing with food stamps, right? They want 64-year-old people living in rural, far-flung places who can't find work because there is none to be found, to starve to death and then blame Biden for it. I mean, meanwhile, last night at 2:00 in the morning, they were all huddled together, amending this budget. It's not a budget. I'm sorry. It's the raising of the debt ceiling. They wanted all these, provisions added to their agreement to pay the bills of the United States of America, even though Biden had very little to do with the debt that the United States of America has now, right? But they agreed to a tax break for, certain states for second-generation biofuel and carbon dioxide sequestration and biodiesel and renewable diesel. That is mostly centered on states like Iowa and Missouri and Minnesota because of the ethanol and the biofuels business that goes on in those states. So they agreed to keep a tax break in this agreement that they think they're going to get in the House to raise the debt ceiling, when these things really need to be discussed during a budget negotiation. Not, but if they're into burning the entire thing down, well, you couldn't do any better than this vehicle that we have right now, which is the debt ceiling. You really couldn't do a more thorough job on destroying the United States of America as you could if you just refused to pay previous debt. 780,000 people will lose their jobs, according to Moody's Analytics. And Forbes has articles about it. Barron's has articles about it. I mean, you're talking like we would lose 1 million jobs right away. The amount of retirement savings that people have working for them in the stock market or working for them in mutual funds, which is the stock market, but it's packages of stocks, it would tank. The last time they took the debt ceiling fight right up to hours before we defaulted was 2011, and we know that people lost 20% of their retirement savings. We know that the United States was downgraded, that our credit rating was downgraded for the first time in the history of the United States. This was the Republicans doing what they're doing now, but now they're doing it in a much more maggot way, where it seems like, you know, when Matt Gaetz says, oh, I got at least 8, and you know you can only lose 4 Republicans and still get 218 votes out of them, because there is no Democrat that's going to vote to cut cancer research. There's no Democrat that's going to cut preschool. There's no Democrat that's going to cut VA benefits. There's no Democrat that's going to, you know, cut Medicaid or food stamp benefits to people who need them. No way. So they need all the Republicans to vote for this, and you can only lose 4 because of the math in the House. You know, they have 218, 19, 20, 21, 22. They have 222. So 4 can do what they want. But Matt Gaetz is sitting there saying, no, I know of at least 8. And you know, you could just imagine who they are. They're going to be Boebert and Gosar and Biggs and him and, all the maggots. All the maggots. They're going to vote to default the United States of America. And a deep global recession will be the result of them doing that. And then the only thing that's left is to manage the messaging and blame Biden for what they're doing today, which is holding us all hostage to their ridiculous wet dream of people literally dying of starvation in this country and, dying in childbirth, dying of disease, and dying in poverty because they can't leave the house to work because they have no child care for their children. And what are they looking to cut? They're looking to cut the Inflation Reduction Act, which was signed into law last summer. They want to eliminate $1 billion to remove building codes that require new buildings meet energy efficient requirements. $5 billion for energy infrastructure projects. $1.9 billion in grants to improve transportation access to various, cut-off places in this country, to build roads and places where you could start a business because you could run a truck, right? $200 million out of the national park system, $5 billion in grants for reducing climate pollution. This is what they're doing, and this is not the time.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show.
It is.
To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
I thought that Moody's analysis was very good on how we'd lose 780,000 jobs. But there's in some ways a more important Moody's analysis that came out a little while ago. It's about the danger to our country, to our economy, of even playing default brinksmanship. You're right. I was there in 2011. I was one of the negotiators with then Vice President Biden. What happened when they scared the United States consumer, and the global economy? I'll tell you, Moody's estimated it cost 1.2 million jobs, 1.2 million jobs just because of their default brinksmanship. It is a fact that consumer confidence went down 22% during that period. Small business consumer confidence went down one of the largest ever. We were downgraded for the first time in our history. So one needs to understand we should have a robust debate on the budget. The president's put out one. They've put out an extreme one. Let's have that debate. But nobody should hold our economy and our full faith credit hostage. And this is not something where you can say Democrats are being hypocritical. You don't see the president of the United States saying, hey, pass my child care or billionaire minimum tax that I propose, or I'm going to default the economy. And more importantly, you didn't see Nancy Pelosi do that 3 different times, or Chuck Schumer, 3 different times when President Trump wanted to raise the debt limit. That's because we all learned in 2011 no one
play with this.
should play default brinksmanship.
Except that maybe McCarthy's seen the same Moody's report, right? 740,000 jobs by the end of 2024 lost. And if you calculate that the vast majority of those jobs will come before Election Day, there's some brinksmanship there. There's some betting on the fact that the American consumer is going to feel gloomy if a whole bunch of jobs have been lost, and they will vote Joe Biden out of office. This is the kind of thing that could come back and bite you on the behind if you try it.
Yes, I mean, the American people could figure it out and realize that the Republicans did this to them or not. And they could blame Joe Biden. And that is what the Republican Party is thinking. They're thinking that you should suffer, you should pay the price, you should starve, your children should lose their preschool. We should stop building, we should stop the infrastructure projects, we should stop, trying to, build chips factories here. We should stop trying to, make cleaner energy. We should stop all of this stuff, stop investing in cancer, cut the VA by $30 billion. $30 billion. I swear to God, that's 30 million fewer healthcare visits. That's fewer staff. That's an increased backlog, longer wait times for benefits, a $30 billion shortfall for veterans funding. Where do I get my information? The Military Times. Go visit them at militarytimes.com and read it for your freaking self. This is what they will do. This is called cutting off your nose to spite your face and then blaming somebody else for cutting off your nose to spite your face. It is classic gaslighting, and it is something that they are apt to want to do. Hopefully, the threat of a Democratic Senate who will never go along with this is enough to make them snap out of it. But I don't know. They are literally gambling with 1.2 million lost jobs, a 22% decrease in consumer confidence, and holding the entire global economy, not just our economy, hostage to their hopes, dreams, and desires that people in this country will blame Joe Biden for what they are contemplating doing. It's so sad and it's so sick, and it's all a result of a media sort of environment where people don't read newspapers. I don't know why. It's one of the thrills of my day. What do you read in the toilet? What are you reading?
A lot of fantasy football, basketball, baseball for me.
For you? Oh,
yeah,
I thought it was
fantasy.
Like Pottery Barn catalogs or something, But no, what are you just get a subscription to some damn thing and read it in the bathroom, for God's sake. I'm not like cutting in on your valuable time over here. I'm not telling you that you can't play fantasy football. Just don't do it on the toilet. Read the newspaper. Get yourself oriented, for God's sake, because you got channels out there and you got platforms out there that are just sitting there lying. Some of them are infighting. This one is against that one because that one extorted this one. I mean, it's such useless crap. What in the hell? Like in Montana, there's a transgendered representative. Her name's Zoe Zephyr, who Montana is so completely hell-bent on keeping her from coming to, she's an elected representative, just like Justin Pearson and Justin Jones were elected in Tennessee, okay? And they want to remove her so badly from the chamber, even though she's been duly elected, right? I mean, does anybody remember, what was her name? Danica Moore, from Virginia? Okay, she was the first transgendered servant, public servant elected. And she's been reelected 3 times. Nobody has a problem with her. She's, exceptional. She's passionate about, families and issues and the climate and all that. People like the way she votes. But honestly, they're trying to get rid of this Zoe Zephyr girl for having the temerity to object to a bill that would detransition people who already have access to hormone therapy. And, it affects her. So when she speaks about it, just like Justin Pearson and Justin Jones spoke about gun violence that affected them, people sat up and said, wow, you can't manufacture that kind of passion. This is a real thing. I should listen to her. Well, in Montana, they're having absolutely none of it. So they silenced her. They literally told her to shut up and sit down. And when people came to the gallery and protested and said, let her speak, they blamed her. They're the ones that silenced her. They're the ones that are trying to get rid of an elected official. This is like the whole thing with them, right? Don't listen to what the voters chose. Don't listen to what the voters want. Don't listen to the polling. Don't listen to the fact that everybody in America wants background checks, or that 68% of Americans don't want to see a ban on abortion. Just do what we want and then keep people from voting. Gerrymander them out of their power. And if somebody should get elected that we don't like, just expel them. Or tell them to sit down and shut up. And when people show up to protest our undemocratic way, Tell the member that we're retaliating against that they caused their own misery. And that's called gaslighting, and that's what's going on. That's going to solve any of our problems. Like, that's going to, pay off our debt, or that's going to solve the crime problem. I mean, can't you even celebrate the fact that, she'll never have an abortion in Montana? Can't you even celebrate that? Zoe Zephyr, I promise you, will never have an abortion. Celebrate that. It's not going to solve your crime problem. It's not going to solve your gun problem. It's not going to solve the rural problem. It's not going to solve deaths of despair. You're going to create more deaths of despair. If anything, you're adding to your problem. But honestly, it's all hell-bent on, triggering people, rallying them around non-policy policy. When we need policy, we have some problems, we need to solve them. So, like, you look at Washington State, okay? Jay Inslee is the governor in Washington State. Jay Inslee just signed the assault weapons ban in Washington State and also signed a 10-day waiting period for guns and background checks and safety classes if you want to own a weapon, okay? I mean, it was a beautiful thing. That's going to go a long way to solving some of the problems of mass shootings. And we know that because the numbers are knowable. We know that the numbers of people in 2022 was the highest number of dead people, active shooter casualties, in the past 5 years. We know that. And that's not easy to know because we're not allowed to compile that data. And so you need outside organizations culling through newspapers to get the information to create the data. Because we don't allow any of our health organizations, we don't allow our FBI, we don't allow local, we don't allow anybody to compile information on gun murder or gun death or homicide or anything to do with guns. Not allowed to compile the data. So you have to have outside groups go through the newspapers. But we had a report 50 active shooting incidents in 2022 left 313 casualties, 100 people killed, not including the shooters. Only 9 of these incidents saw no casualties. So Washington State decided, you know what? We can do something. And so the thing that we can do, I can do, the legislature can do, is we can ban assault weapons. Can't go and confiscate them, and nobody's looking to confiscate anything. Okay, but we can actually say, here's the cutoff date for buying them in this state. And, up until then, you can only buy them if you are going to Washington State, but you don't live in Washington State. And then good luck. Honestly, but no, they're kicking Zoe Zephyr out of the Montana House, a duly elected member of the Montana House. They're kicking her out. Or shutting her down, telling her she's not even allowed to attend anymore. She can't even go to her job. They're banning her from going to work. I thought they were so pro-work. I don't know. It's sick.
Mary had a little man.
We believe that all men are created
equal to the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
For 2 years, Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch used incredibly blurry photos to unsuccessfully try to sell this 3-bedroom, 3.5-bath cabin on a 40-acre property in Colorado, purposefully built right along the Colorado River to be an ideal fishing getaway. Politico reports today that just 9 days after Gorsuch was confirmed by the Senate to our nation's highest court, 9 days later, Neil Gorsuch got an offer. The chief executive of one of the nation's biggest law firms, Greenberg Traurig, bought this ideal fishing getaway. Gorsuch reported making somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 from that sale, but federal disclosure records show Gorsuch never disclosed the identity of the purchaser. Despite the fact that Gorsuch in the past has disclosed who bought him a fishing rod, he did not disclose who bought his literal fishing cabin. Since then, that chief executive law firm has been involved in 22 cases before the court.
Oh, my God.
In 12 of those cases, Gorsuch himself has a recorded opinion. He sided with Greenberg-Traurig 8 times and against them 4 times. But he has never recused himself. Now, the chief executive of this law firm, the guy who bought the property, he told Politico he did not know Neil Gorsuch was one of the owners when he made his first offer.
Then you're
and
an
that the
idiot.
fact that Gorsuch was going to be a Supreme Court justice was absolutely irrelevant to the purchase of the property. Gorsuch himself did not respond to Politico's questions about this sale. NBC News has reached out as well. And we have not yet heard back, which is okay then. This kind of sale and this lack of disclosure and lack of recusal would be a massive ethics problem for basically any other official in our government.
Yeah.
But the Supreme Court plays by its own rules, and that is becoming more and more untenable.
I mean, it is ridiculous that there are no ethics rules for Supreme Court justices. How's that working out for everybody, huh? Because the decisions they're making, they literally told New York, the state of New York, in the Bruin decision, which everybody forgets about, which is a gun decision, that said New York cannot limit concealed carry. New York has absolutely no ability to tell New Yorkers how New Yorkers ought to live. And that if you want to bring a weapon to a very crowded Times Square as a tourist or some angry ex-employee, like let's say you just got fired from Fox or some such crap, and you really don't have vacation homes in Maine and Florida, and you're just peeved or pissed or just looking to make some news, you can bring a weapon to Times Square, according to the United States Supreme Court. That's the Bruin decision. Then we know about the Dobbs decision because women are just telling their stories to anybody that will listen to them, saying we were left to bleed out in a department store. Nobody could tend to us until our lives were in jeopardy. I had twins. One was viable, one wasn't. I had to go out of state in order to save my viable fetus because one of them was not viable and would have caused a collapse of my entire pregnancy. Now they're attacking the Food and Drug Administration. They don't have the authority to, conduct 4 years of, double-blind studies and conclude that mifepristone is safer than, Viagra. What are you going to do? What are you going to do, everybody, if the Supreme Court decides Viagra is part of the problem? What are you going to do then, huh? Huh, Mr. Man? You can't get out of the cock-a-doodle car without your Viagra. So, honestly, they're making some of the worst decisions I've ever seen in my life, and they're doing it for pro-corporate interest. The idea that we're bringing back child labor, I can't say this often enough now because this is the thing. This is the reason why they want women to make more. This is the reason for forced pregnancy. Honestly, corporate hopes and dreams are that they can stay in America in a race to the bottom for the lowest cost labor, and that would be children, and we need more of them. But they don't have any ethics at all on the United States Supreme Court, and they'll sit there and they'll say stupid things to you like this, and I don't know, it'll sound good for a minute, but I need you to think this through. They're going to say, well, we were a created branch created by the United States Constitution. Because we are Article 3 in the Constitution, that's why they refer to them as Article 3 judges and Article 3 justices, because the judiciary branch was created in Article 3 of the United States Constitution. Article 1 is the legislature, believe it or not the presidency. Article 2 is the executive, the president. And 3 are the courts, okay? And they'll say, because we are a separate entity under the United States Constitution, that means that Congress can't regulate us. That means the executive has no say over us. Now, think about that for a brief moment. Because it seems to me that Congress has oversight over the executive branch, which is a separate article of the Constitution. So why wouldn't they have oversight over the judicial branch? They do. And every other justice, every other federal court judge, every other Article 3 judge in the United States has to abide by disclosure rules and ethics rules as set forth by the United States Congress. But somehow the Supreme Court doesn't want anybody to make rules for them that say that if they sell their $2.84 million home, which sat on the market for 2 freaking years, to the to the chairman or to the head lawyer of Greenberg Traurig. By the way, in case that sounds familiar to you, you know whose law firm that was? That was Jack Abramoff's law firm. Yes, that's where Casino Jack, they even made a movie about his destruction and his greed and his shaking down of, Native Americans in service of, his casino clients, right? Went to jail for it. But that's his law firm. That's his law firm. So, the Supreme Court doesn't need any ethics rules. A Supreme Court justice can take an offer from one of the largest law firms in the United States of America that has an extreme lobby shop. I mean, most of their business is lobbying. It's not exactly litigating, although they do litigate, and they do end up in front of the Supreme Court, and they did end up in front of Judge Gorsuch 22 times, and Gorsuch didn't feel like he needed to recuse himself in those cases because there's no law that can make him do it. Same thing with Clarence over here. Okay, Clarence's wife, as you know, works for the Heritage Foundation, made $686,000 working for Heritage Foundation, and never disclosed. On the line where it was asked whether or not his wife, made money, he just left it blank, just refused to answer. I think Clarence was even one better. I think he lied. I think he said 0. He actually put a 0. But there's nothing you can do to hold them accountable because there is no law that applies to the way that they comport themselves, the way that they conduct themselves, the way that their filling out of forms can be enforced so that they're truthful forms. So there was a letter sent by Senator Dick Durbin, who is the chairman in the Senate of the Judiciary Committee. And he asked if, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, would like to come voluntarily and speak with him, in an open forum so that the American people can understand just what is the objection to ethics rules, if any, that Congress might pass that would apply to the Supreme Court justices. And, Judge Roberts, even though his court has a disapproval rating of 58%, 58% of Americans, which is the highest disapproval rating the Supreme Court has ever enjoyed in this here country. He said, I'm not worried about our reputation. I don't care to come and speak with you. He declined. He declined to come and speak. And he included in his letter a statement of ethics principles and practices to which all of the current members of the Supreme Court subscribe. But there aren't any. It's like a blank piece of paper. Oh, the nerve of these people. They literally live in a fortress.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
We need to clean up the court as well. We have to ensure that the mockery which Justice Clarence Thomas is actually committing is corrected, because it is a violation of the public trust. Clarence Thomas is serving on the High Court with the highest level of corruption. I will say what needs to be said. Clarence Thomas should resign from the Supreme Court of the United States. His reputation is unsalvageable. It is evident that he cannot judge right from wrong, so why should he be judging the country's most important cases on its highest court? And the court must root out this type of unethical conduct from occurring again. The court must take action. Our goal to the Supreme Court is simple. Get your house in order, or Congress will do it for you.
Okay, so that's Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts, standing there with Senator Elizabeth Warren, also of Massachusetts, and Ayanna Pressley, all of them saying that the High Court is so corrupt at this point with the, presence of, and this was probably before the Gorsuch story broke, Clarence Thomas his reputation, his trust, and, the law is just a matter of trust. That's all the law is. Okay, if people don't trust the law. If people don't have any faith in the courts, if people don't have any belief in the institution of the courts, then there is no law, and this place is lawless. And that is what the Republicans are looking to do. They're looking to, you know, when you see Congress has a 22% approval rating, they love it. They love it because this is the Ronald Reagan theory of governing. The government is not here to help you. The government is here to hurt you, right? And the Republicans keep doubling and tripling down on the hurt that they can deliver to you so that you'll demand no more government. And they're breaking the courts. The courts are broken. And it's broken when you have a Supreme Court with at least 2 Supreme Court justices can be shown to be corrupt in their behavior, in the exchange of money, in what looks like and smells like and sounds like a quid pro quo. And when the managing partner or the giant head of a giant law firm with a burgeoning lobby shop actually says, oh, I had nothing to do with Gorsuch being on the court. I had nothing to do with, I didn't even know whose home it was I was buying for $2.85 million that was sitting on the market for 2 years. I never asked the real estate agent who the owner is. Really? We're supposed to believe that? And so they are calling for Clarence to be removed. But, you know, this is why the election, you know, people in the Republican Party, they vote on the Supreme Court. They vote. That's an issue for them. That's a voting issue for them. They thought they wanted an abortion ban, right? They had that issue for 50 years. And they thought that was a voting issue for them, right? And now they got their wet dream of an abortion ban, which could be a federal abortion ban, but they've gotten one in at least, 15 states where women are forced to have pregnancies that aren't viable. Women are forced to bleed out in fast food places where people are forced to not get twins tended to where one is viable and one is not. And doctors refusing them patient care because doctors are being criminalized, right? And they're scared to tend to the women. We already saw almost an 11% reduction in medical school students choosing obstetrician, choosing OBGYN, obstetrician and gynecology as their specialty. We've already seen people don't want to go into and so that just decreases even further the amount of health care available to women, even if you live in states where abortion is legal. Now they have a live issue in front of the court where the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is going to hear oral arguments about whether or not the FDA erred in its, safety and efficacy studies with regard to mifepristone, which is only for early abortion. It's only good up to 10 weeks. And now they're cutting that avenue off for women, too. I mean, this is a sickness, but the Republicans did vote for many, many, many election cycles on the Supreme Court. It was a voting issue for them. They wanted this abortion ban. Now they have it, and they're not exactly delighted with their choice, which is what's going to happen when food stamps have a work requirement for 65-year-olds, when Medicaid has a work requirement, but you can't make more than $26,000 and still be eligible for Medicaid, right? Everybody's going to find out the hard way what taking health care away from people does to people. Everybody's going to find out the hard way what taking food away from people does to people. Everyone's going to find out the hard way what taking childcare and pre-K away from working parents does to working parents. Everybody's going to find out the hard way. But the Republicans are delighting in this because they don't give a damn what you think. They're just going to prohibit you from voting. And the Supreme Court has in front of it the ultimate case, the ultimate voting rights case, the ultimate case on gerrymandering and voting rights and whether or not your vote gets counted. And that is the case I keep on trying to focus you upon. It's the Moore case, okay? And that case is going to decide whether the theory of an independent legislature holds water. And if they say that it does, if they say there is such a thing as an independent legislature theory, then what they're going to be saying is that your vote doesn't need to be counted. The legislature picks the winner of a presidential election. The legislature decides which slate of electors goes to the court. goes to January 6th, goes to be certified on January 6th. How do they get there? Because in the Constitution, it does say that the manner in which the state's electors are chosen is left up to the states. And they're going to argue that means the state legislature, not the population of the states, not the voting population. That's what they're going to argue. And that case is a game changer. And that is why, if nothing else, if abortion isn't doing it for you, if overturning a 23-year-old decision by the FDA that mifepristone and misoprostol are safe and effective for women up to 10 weeks to end their pregnancies with, so that they don't have grueling, awful side effects like chills and fever and bleeding and cramping, which is what misoprostol alone causes. That's why mifepristone goes first. So mifepristone goes first. It stops you from making progesterone. It actually regulates a hormone that contributes to your being pregnant. And when it limits the production of progesterone, you are much more able to take misoprostol, which is going to allow you to empty your uterus without cramping, bleeding, without excess fever and chills. Now, if they get their way on this, that might be a voting issue for a whole lot of women, Republican ones, independent ones, Democratic ones, and that's good. But the idea that there is a live case in front of this corrupt and tainted, distrusted Supreme Court that might just take away the ability for people to vote, well, you probably have some appearance of voting, but of it counting, well, that's a whole other thing. That's real Russian stuff.
Connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Now to Montana and the growing outrage over the treatment of a transgender lawmaker. Public protests in the legislature were met with police in riot gear on Monday. This was the third straight session that Democratic State Representative Zoe Zephyr was barred from speaking over a comment she made about a bill to ban gender-affirming care. She now says she could face censure or expulsion from the chamber later today at the hands of the Republican majority. Meg Oliver has more on this story.
Standing defiantly Monday, Montana House Representative Zoe Zephyr raised her arm holding a microphone to amplify the voices of her supporters, demanding she no longer be silenced. The freshman lawmaker, who is transgender, tweeted last night that she faces expulsion or censured later today. That's after Republican House leaders announced they would vote whether her actions violated the safety, dignity, or decorum of the House of Representatives.
No representative is above our House rules.
For over a week, Zephyr has been barred from speaking on the House floor until she apologized for her comments opposing a Republican bill banning gender-affirming care for minors.
If you vote yes on this bill and yes on these amendments, I hope the next time there's an invocation, when you bow your heads in prayer, you see the blood on your hands.
Montana's Republican House Speaker deemed those comments out of line and that they broke House decorum.
We're elected to have the hard conversations.
Speaking to John Dickerson last night on CBS News Streaming, Zephyr says she's not apologizing for what she said, and in fact, she would say it again.
When marginalized communities who are impacted the most by legislation, rise up and speak to the harm, those folks in power, particularly on the far right, do not want to be held accountable for the real harm that these bills bring.
That, listen, this is exactly it, because they want to legislate on issues that don't put a nickel in your pocket, on issues that just get you angry, on issues that you just, say to yourself, I don't care about that person who's getting harmed. I just don't care about that person, or I don't like that person, or I hate that person, or whatever personal feeling you have is all they're legislating on. And so today in Montana, they voted, the House did, to formally punish Zoe Zephyr. They have banned her from attending or speaking during a session of Congress. She will be allowed to vote remotely. She is not allowed to. Now, I want you to understand how undemocratic this really is, whether you don't understand her, you don't want to understand her, or you do. This is an elected official, someone chosen by the people in her district in Montana. I was mentioning Danica Roem in Virginia. Danica Roem was the first transgendered House member in a state house, and she's been reelected by her district in Virginia, which is considered the South, 3 times. She's been sent to her assembly in Virginia by her constituents 3 times. They like her. She does a great job for them. She holds herself out for re-election, and she gets reelected. She does it again, and she gets reelected, and a 3rd time, and still gets reelected. People like her. This is the most fascist attack on elected officials, and it's happening repeatedly now. It just happened in Tennessee over a different issue. It happened in Tennessee over the issue of guns and gun violence, simply because the 2 Justins and Carolyn Johnson had the temerity to bring up the fact that most people want background checks in Tennessee before you can buy an Uzi, okay? And that was not comporting with their corporate hopes and dreams and their donor money's wishes. And so they just tried to undo 2-3 elections in the state house in Tennessee. The people of Tennessee were having none of it. I suggest the people of Montana have none of this because it is undemocratic, it is fascism pure and simple, and it is trying to pin the blame for the stuff that they are for on someone who has absolutely nothing to do with what they are for. Like depriving families of pre-K or food stamps or Medicaid benefits. It has nothing to do with it. Or bleeding the VA dry out of $30 billion because they need to cut some damn thing and they don't think anybody's paying attention to the actual cuts. They're voting right now on whether or not to raise the debt ceiling. Actually, they start voting at 4:45. It's 4:38 Eastern time right now. So in just a few scant moments, the House in the United States House of Representatives will hold a vote on whether or not they're accepting this rule, to be technical. And if they accept the rule, they're going to deem their position on raising the debt ceiling with these caveats, with these cuts, as a precursor to raising the debt ceiling or not. They will deem it passed if this rule passes. There won't be another vote, is what I'm saying. So this is the most undemocratic stuff we've ever seen, and it's just beginning. I'm telling you, there is a case you really need to watch. This case comes out of freaking North Carolina, where the state Supreme Court in North Carolina looked at the gerrymandered maps in North Carolina and said that they were politically gerrymandered. They were gerrymandered to gain Republican seats. It was an illegal map, and still the people of North Carolina voted in 2022 in the midterm elections with those illegal maps. So now the case goes to the Supreme Court. It's called Moore v. Harper. And Moore v. Harper's already been argued in front of the United States Supreme Court. And so all we're waiting for now is their decision, and it includes the theory known as the independent legislature theory, which is the most fascist thing you've ever heard of, okay? It is completely fascist. It's you know, Franco-fascism. It's Hitler fascism. It's Putin's kind of thing, where you have this appearance that you can vote, but the state legislatures choose the winner. The state Supreme Courts also can change the manner in which the electors are selected, so that the state Supreme Courts in your state can actually do away with elections. I doubt that they would go that far because Americans are so used to not showing up to vote, but they know it's election day. And if it wasn't election day and they didn't get the right to not show up to vote, I think they'd be pissed. So they might keep the appearance of it being election day, but I'm not going to vote kind of thing. But really, it will be up to the state legislature to choose the winner. That's what's in front of this corrupt Supreme Court. So what do we do? What do we do? Well, on the issue of the Supreme Court, everybody has to show up and vote this one last time. I mean, I'm hoping that by 2024, we still have free and fair elections. That would be good. But I don't know. The other thing we do is we say to we have to get a House of Representatives that's in Democratic hands because we have a Senate. But we need a filibuster-proof Senate. Even though Mitch McConnell did away with confirmation of justices with a 60-vote margin, right? It's just a bare majority. It's a bare majority now. It's 50+1. That was Mitch McConnell who undid that portion of the filibuster so that he could get Gorsuch on the court in the first place, right? But we need to expand the court. We've done it 7 times before. It's not exactly precedent setting. But we would need legislation to do it.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
And I love the fact that one of the very first words in it is freedom. And that he really is taking this word back for Democrats. And to me, it was just the loud and clear signal. We stand on one side and extremist Republicans are on the other. And the side we stand on truly is about freedom. It's about women making their own decisions about abortion, their own decisions about IVF, their own decisions about birth control. It's about people being treated with respect and having that kind of ability to be able to determine their own futures. And for the president to just come straight out of the box with that's where he wants to lead, I like that kind of leadership. And then the fact that he can bring in Vice President Harris to just punch it home. I like the position that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are in on abortion. I think it's the fight that the American people want to see. We need to expose what the Republicans are up to and make it clear that we are the party that stand for access to abortion, stand for access to birth control. We will be there on the side of American women all across this country.
Well, it's not just American women all across this country. With all due, respect for Elizabeth Warren, who's a great, a great voice for the Democratic Party. No doubt about it. I mean, I wanted her to be president of the United States. Okay, I still do. I hope there comes a time. But it's not just about women anymore. It is about using the awesome power of your government to punish companies that you disagree with politically. Like, Disney sued Ron DeSantis today for using the awesome power of the government of the state of Florida as its chief executive in order to punish Disney for a political view it holds regarding its cast members, regarding its shareholders, regarding its position on LGBT Gay Pride Day at their company. In their own company, which is a publicly held company, right? And so Ron DeSantis has tried to, take away their board, take away their ability to use their land the way they want to use their land. And, this is a beautifully stark difference. Ron DeSantis tried to bamboozle Disney into, losing its land development rights by electing or choosing, nobody elected this board, but he was going to handpick board members on the Reedy Creek District Board. And that board is the board that governs the district that is Disney. And he decided that once he handpicked and hand-selected a new board for the Reedy Creek District, he could then take the land and build prisons on it. This is what Ron DeSantis' stated goal for the Disneyland was. He thought he would build a prison right next to Disney to punish them because he politically disagrees with their position on LGBT youth who work for them and who might own a share of stock. And also the people that go to Disney, the people that buy the tickets, and the people that stand in line at Disney. And so he used the government. Now, Disney was ahead of him, and Disney had the board vote before he actually, before he handpicked a new board. And now Disney is suing Ron DeSantis because Ron DeSantis is using the full force of his government power in order to retaliate against them for a political position that Ron DeSantis disagrees with this company on. Now, just so you know, Disney is the largest employer in this state. They employ 75,000 plus people. And that's just Disney. 75,000 people. They bring $1 trillion into the tax base in Florida. They pay taxes in Florida. Okay? The ancillary value of having Disney in Orlando to Orlando businesses, whether they're restaurants or hotels or Uber drivers, whatever, it's uncountable for me. Okay? I'm sure there's somebody that keeps track of the numbers of profits that are made by small businesses simply because they operate near Disney. That's one example. The other example is what's happening to Zoe Zephyr in Montana today. She's been barred, even though she's an elected official, she's been banned and barred from going to work, from going to her job, which is in the state assembly in Montana, because they disagree with her politics. The same thing happened to the two Justins in Tennessee. They were expelled after they were newly elected to serve the people of Memphis and the people of Nashville, elected by a constituency to go represent them, and the Tennessee Republicans decided to expel them because they disagreed with them politically. Does that suggest that there's free speech in this country anymore? Does that suggest to you a free society? Does that suggest to you a democracy or a republic, a representative republic of any kind? Or does that suggest to you fascism, where elections are simply undone by a majority vote in the state house, where the full force of the executive in a state can steal land from the largest employer in the state because he disagrees with them politically, where he dictates to parents that their children who may be being raised in a two-parent household that includes two men or a two-parent household that includes two women, that their children are not free to say that through high school. They're not allowed to discuss their situation at home in school because it's not a political belief that he holds. And so he's banned that kind of conversation in public schools. Does this suggest to you that this is a free country? When a governor can ban books simply based on one parent's objection, or a governor can say to teachers, shut down your library in your classroom pending review by Moms for Liberty, who nobody elected, because he politically disagrees with the content of a book that has nothing to do with pornography. It just simply has accurate history in it. It might be a book about Fannie Lou Hamer, who, by the way, had guns. Okay, just so you know. She had a shotgun in every corner of her house because she was registering black people to vote in Dixie. And she was terrified of white supremacists coming to kill her. So anyway, I mean, honestly, do you see why you need to show up and vote? Do you see the need now to do something that's going to help go a long way to solving our problems? Because what we have here are illiberal, and by that I mean anti-democratic, undemocratic states in this country who are dictating land ownership, dictating words, dictating books, dictating businesses, dictating anything to do with, investing in a greener economy, which is the economy of the future, whether we like it or not, whether you believe, I don't know what you believe, and I don't care what you believe with regard to global warming, with regard to climate change. I don't care. I can tell you what the rest of the world thinks about it. And I can tell you, because the rest of the world thinks it's real and thinks it needs to govern accordingly, it's going to be a multiple trillion-dollar marketplace for everything from factory builds to renewables, the kind of fuel, the kind of energy that the world would like to see. And so whether you believe or you don't believe, I don't care. I care about the new marketplace and whether or not we get a piece of it. And what are the Republicans voting on right now? Doing away with the provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act that made significant investments into environmentally friendly office buildings and hotels and apartments and everything else that hasn't even broken ground yet, right? And incentivizing those kinds of buildings through tax policy. They hate it. They absolutely hate it. I mean, this makes no sense to me. But they are not democratic. They obviously have certain groups, entire groups of people that they despise. Those groups would be women. Those groups would be the men who love them. Those groups would be inventive, innovative builders and plasterers and pipe fitters and plumbers and painters. They just hate you.